This is a silica-free surfacing webinar, and we're talking about how the industry is pivoting to protect its people. My name is Jessica McNaughton, and I am with CaraGreen. A little bit about CaraGreen. I consider us a curator of healthy materials. We bring healthier materials to market. That means we're looking at industry trends and issues, and this is certainly one of those issues, and try to find better solutions. So our goal is not only to provide these materials, but be the go-to source for information on these topics. And we really like to network with people throughout the industry to come up with content for our podcast, our blogs, our newsletters, and things like that. So today we're going to understand what is silica, how is it used, why is it dangerous, what healthier options are out there, and to come up with some things that you guys should be aware of and things that could be done and are being done to address the dangers of silica. This presentation will be on our website afterwards, and also you can find it on silicafreesurfacing.com. So what is silica? Silica is oxidized silicon or silicon dioxide. There's a chemical rendering of it there on the right. It's the second most abundant mineral in the Earth's crust. So there's a lot of it. There's two types, crystalline silica and non-crystalline silica, which is also referred to as amorphous silica. Where is it found? It's all around us, and very much so in our construction materials. It's in sand, sandstone, shale, slate, natural stone. And it's mined, and it's used in all of these foundational building materials that you see listed here. It's also used for fracking. So what's crystalline silica? So silica, as we said, has two parts. There's crystalline and amorphous. And crystalline silica is the one that we're really going to dive into today. Quartz is the most abundant type of crystalline silica, and there's two types that are made from volcanic rock. And those are tridymite and cristobalite. Quartz is the one that we're going to be talking about today and the one that you are all likely the most familiar with. So why do you use it? Well, chemically it's inert, it can tolerate high temperatures, it's got a high melting point, and it's got a very repeatable physical structure that's very strong, which makes it very hard wearing. And again, the abundance of it, it's everywhere. Why is it dangerous? And this is what we've all been hearing about in the industry. When you cut into materials that contain crystalline silica, very, very small particles become airborne and they can enter the lungs. And oftentimes these are particles that you can't see. So if there are particles that you can see, as you see in the pictures here, there are again, very likely particles that you cannot see. Those particles enter your lungs and they can cause a disease called silicosis. It can be long onset, it can be short onset, but it is incurable. The only way you can treat silicosis is with a lung replacement. There's three types: chronic, acute, and accelerated. They all happen at different stages. Chronic is a extended exposure to a small amount of silica over a long time, and accelerated is a short exposure to a large amount, and that is rapid onset, and that can happen very quickly in a matter of weeks or months. It also makes you more susceptible to lung diseases like tuberculosis and lung cancer. So it's effectively weakened your lungs because it's more or less crystallized them as those particles enter your lungs. The danger in our industry are that there's a lot of people that may be out of the trade by now, but they may have been exposed to this for a long time and they didn't know it. So they may be having lung issues and they didn't know what to attribute it to. And now with all this attention being pointed towards silicosis, now they're starting to be aware of this. So pneumoconiosis, that is black lung, silicosis, siderosis, that is this issue where your lungs become effectively crystallized. Black lung was what they called it when the miners had it back in the 1940s. There was a lot of attention given to it then, but in our industry, it hadn't really become a known issue yet. You can see some of these diagrams here at the bottom on the far right. You can see what's happening. These little sharp little crystals are going in, cutting into the tissue of the lungs, and scarring it, and it's effectively blocking that lung from being able to expand. So how did we get here? The history of surfacing. We had laminate in our kitchens in the 70s. We switched to solid surface in the 80s and 90s. The 2000s were granite, And then over the past decade, there's been a massive shift towards quartz countertops. What's the connection between quartz surfaces and silica? Well, we talked about it before. Quartz is the most abundant type of crystalline silica. Quartz is mined, pulverized, and placed into these giant quartz slabs. So engineered stone emerged in 1963, and it was limestone and resin. And then as Breton, who created the equipment to make engineered stone on, they were the ones who initially used limestone. And then as they outsourced their equipment, people started using new product materials with that resin, like marble. And eventually they settled on quartz as the most reliable and the mineral of choice to use with these resins. And then as quartz began to develop, people started demanding more aesthetics. They didn't want it to just look like granite. They wanted it to look like marble, and they wanted it to look like concrete. So these quartz crystals just get more pulverized and pulverized and pulverized so that you can make all these veining patterns and all these different patterns with them. So what surfaces contain silica? This chart shows you which different materials contain silica and in what amounts. So you can see granite can be up to 45–50% silica. Quartz is 90% plus. Some of the sintered stones and porcelains are at the lower end. And then quartzite, which is basically earth-made quartz, that's 95% quartz. So that's basically, it's nearly 100% quartz. But that's kind of the chart that shows the different contents. So an industry unchecked, and this, this is what happens when something becomes popular and people sort of jump on the bandwagon. So quartz became popular. The patents for Breton expired. Chinese manufacturers jumped on the bandwagon, and quartz flooded the market. And the price went down dramatically. So people were kind of having to find new ways to compete. And you started getting two guys with two sawhorses in someone's driveway, dry cutting with a saw, or demand was so high that throughput became the metric and not safety. So there's a lot of obligations here that weren't being fulfilled, right? Manufacturers should have been telling their fabricators or requiring their fabricators to basically sign off on proper handling, proper cutting. That wasn't really being done, with the exception of DuPont early on really made people sign documentation about how to fabricate Zodiac. That doesn't mean it was happening. Fabricators and installers have an obligation to ensure that the people working with this material had the right equipment on, that you were using water for all of this, and lots of water. One of the stories that people often tell me is, people would use all this water for cutting this quartz material, and the water washes away all that airborne dust. But the problem would be everyone would go home for the night, and then they'd come back in the morning and they'd start sweeping, and all of that dust would just go right back up into the air. So there's a lot of education that wasn't happening here. And then OSHA, they have an obligation to police and audit the industry. So there's a lot of responsibility here being spread out. And again, when demand is that high, things are going to fall by the wayside. So it was largely unchecked for a while. Now, how did quartz suddenly become the face of silica? We talked about quartzite. It's 95% silica, but quartz is a mainstream product. It's taking over from granite, and it has the highest silica content, really, of the mainstream materials. New South Wales, Australia is the center of where a lot of this awareness came out. And recently, there was a report by the CDC on 18 cases that were identified in the US. And the general school of thought is that this is the tip of the iceberg, and this is the next asbestos or mesothelioma, is some of the language that's out there. Here's some of the articles that are out there. Workers are falling ill, even dying after making countertops. And then this silicosis, and a new safety program taking on silica dust. So these are the articles that you're finding are, this is on NPR. That's when this really, the awareness of this in the US really took off over the last few months. Now, this has been happening in other countries and there's been awareness of it, but nobody has a litigious society like we do. You know, we are some of the worst when it comes to lawsuits. You guys all know this. With the Australian lawsuits, Aaron Brockovich is now involved in those silicosis lawsuits, and that is a pretty good indicator of kind of where this is going. I used to Google silicosis about 4 years ago because I was concerned with the mining communities where granite and quartz were being mined. So when I would Google it, I would find, you know, these articles about miners in the 1940s, and, you know, it was all about, you know, decades ago. Now, if you Google silicosis, this is what you're finding: ads from silicosis help, silicosis lawyer, silicosis law firm. Like, all of these people are jumping on the bandwagon, so it is a big deal. You know, and people think they have all the proper measures in place to protect their workers now, but the reality is that's great that you're doing all the right things, but is it too little too late, right? There's probably cases that weren't diagnosed. There may have been cases that are misdiagnosed. As these lawyers go out and try to grab people and lump them into these class action lawsuits, there's going to be these retroactive cases, and they could be substantial. And you know how it is. A fabricator isn't going to have deep pockets to pay $10 million to, you know, 10 different families that got that have silicosis cases. They're going to follow the money, and that could fall back to the manufacturers. So, you know, as an industry, we have a responsibility here. What should have happened and what should be happening? There needs to be written plans, regular air quality testing, medical examinations of workers, engineering controls. This is that water, lots of water. You know, and it has to be throughout. It can't be that what I described with, which is you use a wet saw, but all the dust falls on the floor and then it gets swept up and airborne the next day. It's monitoring for all those things. You can use isolation for areas where there's dust. There's a lot of great facilities, quartz manufacturers that have very good isolation practices in place. And then PPE, which is personal protective equipment like respirators, making sure that people are working with respirators. You know, I was driving down the road yesterday and I saw these guys cutting into the asphalt, and there were 6 of them, and I snapped a photo, and they all were just standing in this huge cloud of dust with no masks on. And those are, you know, state employees. So it's, you know, it's bigger than just the countertop industry. It's just that, you know, quartz surfaces are the kind of like the banner or the flag bearer, unfortunately, for our industry right now. And then education. This is manufacturers, quartz manufacturers need to be educating fabricators. Fabricators need to be educating installers if you're outsourcing to installers, or if you've got your own installers and there's turnover, just that ongoing education to let them know why they're wearing that mask. Not, you have to wear a mask, but here's why. So isolation, education, and protection are all important. And you're starting to see these things happen. Caesar Stone, an educational initiative. You know, Decton and Tilestone have this good practice guide. And these things are getting updated. There's a lot of training that's happening from some of the stone institutes, the Marble Institute. And so there's just overall industry awareness, and education is happening. But what can be done at the material level? We can reduce the amount of silica content, or we can eliminate the crystalline silica content. And this is not an either or, this is a path to do both. So there are alternatives out there now that have low crystalline silica content. And some of those are the porcelains. I just threw up a few brands here. Some of the ultra compacts, and then some of the sintered stones like lapotite. So it's really important to isolate, educate, and protect. But the safest solution it would be to completely eliminate crystalline silica from building materials. Now, is this a utopian idea? Yes, it is. But it is a path that the industry likely should be and is on. And at the KBIS show, we actually talked a lot about this, and we talked to some manufacturers about what they were doing, and I've included some of those here. That's actually what kind of was the impetus for us for doing that. This presentation was that we're starting to see people move towards no crystalline silica. So we just wanted to share that with you guys here. So the ways to eliminate crystalline silica are either to get a mineral matrix that's free of silica. So that means all the minerals that are used in the formation of a slab, none of it is crystalline silica. meaning none of it is actually quartz. Producing in the lab an alternative to quartz. So again, it's kind of like the one above, but it's the first one is using naturally occurring minerals, but just not using quartz. The second one is producing a man-made quartz-like atom, basically, or material that performs the same as quartz, but it's not crystalline silica. Amorphous silica, glass dust, and then existing silica-free materials. So different categories, non-stone materials that already are free of silica. And we'll talk a little bit about what those are. So eliminating silica from the mineral mix. So we saw this at the trade shows. There's TICE and then the Kitchen and Bath show. Lapitech has a commitment. They already have some zero silica colors. Lapitech's a sintered stone developed by Breton, and they have an investment into going silica free for their sintered stone. Decton, which is Cosentino, they advertise less than 11% silica, which is actually really good for this industry, and likely ongoing efforts to decrease that even further. And those are the mineral mix ones. And then engineer a non-quartz filler. This is that lab-produced product that I mentioned. So Cosentino at the KBIS show, they had two colors, Polaris and Loger, and they have more innovations in the work, but those were lab-engineered products that were kind of under the Silestone name, but would not be considered quartz because it was an engineered product to replace the quartz. Materials with amorphous silica, recycled glass countertops, things like ice stone, Batrazo, the glass in those is amorphous silica. Naturally silica-free materials, so paper composites like paper stone and Richlite, those have always been silica-free. They're a phenolic and paper blend. Solid surface, that's also silica-free, and you guys are familiar with a lot of those brands, Corian, Ammonite, Durat, and then the Staron and some of the others. Naturally silica-free materials continued, anything wood-based, bamboo, butcher block. So those are Torzo. Those, again, are also silica-free. Okay, so in summary, silica and silicosis aren't going anywhere. The industry widely accepts that this is the tip of the iceberg on these issues. So it's an awareness. Manufacturers keep stepping up, keep educating, keep doing those things that you're doing to protect the fabricators and continue to innovate and create better, healthier materials. We say this at CaraGreen all the time. There's no perfect material. You're always trading off something. But everyone can take measures to improve the health and safety of others. Our tagline is create better, and that's kind of our call to the industry here, is to keep creating better and demanding better. I think you guys are really good at that, and we're here to help in any way that we can. So again, isolation, education, and protection are really important, and substitution could very well be the future of surfacing in the stone space. So that was quick, but with that, I will unmute you all. And if anyone has any questions or comments, I will, here's some information on CaraGreen. There's our blog, podcast, our LinkedIn and Instagram. And then this webinar will be available at silicafreesurfacing.com. And then if you have comments and feedback, if you don't want to mention them here, you are welcome to email us at info@caragreen.com. Okay, if nobody has any comments or questions, then I will wrap this up, and thank you all for joining us.
I do.
Okay.
This is Chris Shank. I just wanted to thank you for addressing this, because I think a lot of time in the sustainability world, I was surprised that it's not always addressed. I've worked for big companies like Montpay and so forth, that we deal with this on a daily basis. And especially when the new OSHA regulation came in and lowered the PEL level, that, that it made it a little more difficult, and everybody was scrambling to meet the requirements and so forth. But I just want to say I'm glad you had this webinar.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. And, a lot of companies are looking for alternatives to, including silica. And, but the other thing too is a lot of people don't realize that it's a very specific size, that just because you see it in the air, it doesn't mean that it's always respirable.
Right.
that it has to be a specific size, and that's what they were addressing in OSHA. So, but thank you very much. It was a great seminar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I'm going to end this here, and this is available if you guys have any questions. As I said, email us at info@caragreen.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.